We ended the last lecture with the Mercenary War. And of course, Carthage survived that war, but barely. And the one thing to take away from that war was the brilliant tactics of Hamilkar Barca. The rebels really just didn't have a general of that caliber. So even though the Carthaginians were severely outnumbered, it was really the tactics of Hamilkar that won the day. Now, during that war, the rebels in Africa encouraged a revolt in Sardinia. And the hope here was that this would put more pressure on Carthage. The Carthaginians, however, sent a relief force to take back Sardinia, but the mercenaries on this expedition mutinied and the Carthaginians were executed. So Sardinia was still in limbo after the conclusion of the Mercenary War. And certainly there was the expectation that since the Mercenary War was now wrapped up, Carthage could concentrate its forces on Sardinia. Well, the rebels looked to Rome for assistance. But Rome had a problem, which apparently wasn't much of a problem at all. That treaty Rome signed with Carthage at the end of the First Punic War recognized Sardinia as a Carthaginian possession. But Rome conveniently decided to ignore that provision and came to the assistance of Sardinia. Basically, this was a takeover, and they threatened Carthage with all-out war if Carthage didn't relinquish possession of Sardinia and Corsica. So what's that gambler saying? You have no cards to play. Well, that was the problem here for Carthage. They had no cards to play, and they basically couldn't afford to call Rome's bluff, and so they decided wisely to hand over the islands rather than risk yet another major war. And this was wise because Carthage really was not in a position to do much against Rome without a fleet. This incident added ammunition for Hamilkar against his political rivals in Carthage, and that was that Rome simply could not be trusted. Hamilkar felt war would come with Rome no matter what concessions Carthage made. In any event, Rome took control of Sardinia and Corsica, and while those losses for Carthage were not as severe as the loss of Sicily, Carthage now needed to look for new sources of revenue. And there was Spain, just waiting to be conquered. And Carthage had just the man for the job, Hamilkar Barca, who, by the way, was now the most significant political figure in Carthage. Quite a comeback since he had been blamed for the losses at the end of the First Punic War. But now with his brilliant successes during the Mercenary War, he could pick his own campaigns for the Barca clan without much interference from his political rivals in Carthage. And his prime target, of course, was Spain. Now, it is important to note that Carthage had previously ventured into Spain and actually had recruited many of their mercenaries from Spain as well, so they were already very familiar with the region. But by 237 BC, Carthage had lost control of the few areas that they managed in southern Spain. So Hamilkar not only wanted to recapture these areas, but also take over the entire Iberian Peninsula. And this would give Carthage control of those lucrative gold and silver mines. That really was the prime objective. And these mines would not only allow Carthage to repay its debt to Rome, but also allow Carthage to build an even more formidable empire than before. And if Hamilkar Barca was correct and war with Rome would come, it was absolutely imperative for Carthage to make the necessary preparations so that this time they could win the war. Before Hamilkar departed from Carthage, he decided to make a sacrifice to the gods. On the altar, Hamilkar summoned Hannibal and made his young son of just 9 swear eternal hatred towards Rome. And as we know now, Hannibal certainly wouldn't let his father down, as he became one of Rome's all-time greatest enemies. So with that, Hamilkar sailed past the Pillars of Hercules and landed off the coast of Iberia. And so Hamilkar's Iberian campaign was underway. Now, unfortunately, Hamilkar's Iberian campaign is not well understood. Mainly this is because Polybius only covers the events sparsely. I remember when I was first reading Polybius, I was really looking forward to reading about Hamilkar's Iberian campaigns. And then I probably read the worst line in my reading of the classics, in which Polybius stated he would not be covering the Iberian campaign. So I was like, no! Well, maybe we should take up a collection and go back in time and give Polybius 1,000 sesterces to finish off the section. Oh well, we can only dream. In any event, we have to use other sources such as Diodorus to fill in the gaps. And unfortunately, Diodorus only gives us a few paragraphs on Hamilkar's activities when this subject really deserves its own chapter. In fact, there are several years of Hamilkar's activities in Spain that are completely lost to history. The good news is that Polybius covers all of Hannibal's later activities in Spain quite extensively. Now, Hamilkar likely ended up in Gades in the summer of 237 BC. Diodorus tells us that Gades was, quote, situated at the farthest extremity of the inhabited world. Hamilkar realized the benefit of the city's location and made it his first base in the Iberian Peninsula. With a base of operations, Hamilkar could now look towards the other parts of Iberia. However, there were numerous tribes in Iberia that needed to be dealt with first. And as I mentioned before, Hamilkar's main objective was to gain control of the gold and silver mines in Spain. But in order to do that, Hamilkar would either have to negotiate with these tribes or defeat them in battle. The first Iberian tribes Hamilkar encountered were the Carthaginians, who were located north of Gades. The Carthaginians go all the way back to Bronze Age Iberia, and their lands were rich in metals, especially gold and copper. Hamilkar was able to conclude a treaty with the Carthaginians without doing a whole lot of fighting. Next, he had to deal with the Turduli. The Turduli were an ancient tribe located to the north of the Carthaginians. This was an area around modern-day Seville. They were under the command of two chieftains, who happened to be brothers. Hamilkar was able to defeat the Turduli, and in the process killed both brothers. After this, he incorporated 3,000 of the enemy into his growing army. Next, Hamilkar had to deal with an even larger army of 50,000 men. This army had been raised by an Iberian chieftain named Indortes. But even before the battle began, the Iberians lost heart and fled to a defensible hill. On that hill, they were besieged by Hamilkar. And with that, Indortes fled yet again under the cover of night. Soon after this, Indortes was captured, and Hamilkar quickly had him crucified, one of the normal means of execution in the ancient world. Although Indortes was executed, Hamilkar released the rest of the prisoners, which numbered around 10,000. With these early successes, Hamilkar was now in the process of securing a major foothold in Iberia. And now the Carthaginians were in control of numerous mines, producing massive amounts of silver and gold. In fact, Gades began to mint silver coins. So Hamilkar now had the ability to pay off his mercenary army in Iberia and keep them gainfully employed for future operations. Hamilkar also began to ship silver ore back to Carthage to help pay off that huge war indemnity to Rome. During this time, the Numidians decided to revolt in Africa. Hamilkar dispatched his son-in-law Hasdrubal back to Africa to suppress this rebellion. There is not a lot of information on this revolt, but what we do know is that Hasdrubal was successful in suppressing the uprising. After those operations were complete, Hasdrubal rejoined Hamilkar in Spain. By the way, the Numidians always seem to have this on and off relationship with Carthage. At certain points they are great friends, and at other times they are bitter enemies. Okay, so over the next several years, Hamilkar continued to press deeper into Iberia. Many cities were taken either through negotiation or by force. He even found the time to found a large city which he named Acraluk. This occurred probably in 235 BC and was meant to establish a new base further east to guard Punic holdings in all of Spain. This advance by the Carthaginians drew the attention of the local natives in this area of Spain. Alarmed by the Carthaginian advance toward their lands, they informed Rome, who decided to investigate the matter. But during this time, Rome had been distracted by revolts in Sardinia and Corsica, so they really didn't have a lot of time to keep an eye on Hamilkar's activities in Spain. But Rome was still suspicious enough to send an embassy in 231 BC to inquire about Carthaginian activities in the area. Hamilkar's reply was simple and direct. "We are taking over these areas in Spain to pay you off." Well, how could Rome protest that response? And so the Romans left and did not concern themselves with the Carthaginians for the next several years. A mistake? Well, undoubtedly it was, given what we know now about Hannibal Barca. In the winter of 228 BC, Hamilkar decided to split his forces. Hasdrubal was dispatched on a separate campaign, while Hamilkar besieged several other Iberian cities. He then established winter quarters at his new base, Acraluk. Shortly after this, Hamilkar died. The manner of death is unclear as there are competing versions. One account has him dying in battle against an unnamed tribe. Another account has Hamilkar thrown off his horse and drowning in a river. Whatever the case is, Hamilkar achieved great success in his 9-year campaign in Spain. Though his death denied Carthage a complete conquest, it did give the Carthaginians a major foothold in the area, and it paved the way for Hannibal to wage a massive war against Rome in Italy itself. After Hamilkar's death, Hasdrubal was immediately appointed as the commander of all Carthaginian forces in Spain. Hasdrubal put together an army of 56,000 and finished off the job that Hamilkar had started. 12 more cities were taken, and Hasdrubal founded a new city off the coast of Spain, New Carthage. New Carthage possessed one of the best harbors in the western Mediterranean, so it served as a nice stepping-off point for access to all of Spain itself. But it would all come to a quick end for Hasdrubal. He was killed by one of his household servants, and that resulted in another change of command, but we will get to that in a few videos, because now we have to switch to Rome, where a major war with the Gauls was about to occur, and we will get to that in the next video.